Squats are a race that no longer exists with any great presence within the 41st millennium. There are still a few of these space dwarves hanging around though, in smaller isolated settlements, or operating as mercenaries in the underhives, but their legacy endures. Even after Games Workshop attempted to retcon them completely, these stunted abhumans were still loved by many and have so seen a slight resurgence. As such, they are something that is often requested as a kitbash on this channel. So I'm Pete the Wargamer, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to kitbash squats. The basis of this conversion came from the Kharadron Overlord range for Age of Sigmar. These steampunk pirate dwarves are probably the closest thing we have to squats in the current range of models, but apart from their height and penchant for guns, there isn't really all that much similarity between the two. Even so, the fact that they are readily available in plastic and are the right proportions made them the excellent basis for this conversion. I grabbed myself one of the Grundstock gun hauler bodies from my bits box, as this was all I had available, but any of the Archnaut minis would work just as well here. The Kharadron kits come with lots of guns, but these are black powder or steam based weapons, and so were not quite sci-fi enough for my needs. Therefore, I turned to the Gene Stealer Cult Neophyte hybrids. This kit contained a wealth of shotguns and autoguns that were surprisingly well proportioned for use with the Kharadron body. From this kit, I clipped away a knife-carrying hand and the arm carrying the shotgun at ease. These were both then cleaned up of any mold lines. Attaching these proved a little trickier than just gluing them to the shoulder, but it may have been because I had chosen this particular torso. I began by attaching the shotgun arm to the torso by first comparing the fit. I could see that the shoulder joint was angled a little too far forward, and so it needed to be trimmed flat. With the two surfaces lining up a little better, I then grabbed my pin vise to do a little pinning. To start, I drilled a few millimeters into both the arm and the torso using a 1mm drill bit. Some 1mm wire was then superglued into the hole in the arm and clipped so that just a few millimeters of wire remained and was then allowed to dry. Once the superglue was no longer wet, I dry fitted the arm against the torso to check on the fit. I didn't plan on gluing anything just yet, as I still need to make some adjustments to the torso first, and I didn't want the arm getting in the way. Now that the right shotgun carrying arm had been prepped, I could begin working on the left arm. I wasn't interested in keeping the blade that it was carrying. It looked too alien for my needs, and I thought that an empty hand would better fit the more at ease pose that the model was developing. So, using my scalpel blade, I carefully cut away the blade from the top and bottom of the fist, before trimming back the hand to better create the appearance of a closed fist. Before I could attach this now knifeless arm, I still need to make some adjustments to the shoulder itself. I focused my trims to the back half of the shoulder, so that the arm would angle outwards a little more than it did originally. A few frequent comparisons against the torso during this process ensured that I wasn't making the cuts in the wrong places or in the wrong amounts. When I was happy with how the arm was sitting against the shoulder, I repeated that same pinning technique that I had applied to the right arm, and once again, I didn't attach the left arm to the torso just yet either. To help bulk out the model a bit, and to also hide a connecting point at the back of the torso, I decided to add a backpack to the squat. Once again, this was sourced from the Gene Stealer Cult Neophyte set. I took the pack intended for the mining laser, clipped away the cable leading from it, and then cleaned up the part of any mold lines. I then compared this backpack against the torso and found that it wasn't quite fitting properly. The small tab that was intended for attaching the original Kharadron tank was getting in the way, so this was removed. The backpack was now fitting much better than it had done previously, so it was glued into place. One of the key design features of the squats were the quilted pattern of their tunics. This was something that I intended to recreate on this particular model, which is another reason why the Kharadron torsos are a good option, due to their lack of armour around their midriff. This particular torso did have a few extra bits of equipment covering the belly though, so these were removed with a combination of my clippers and my knife. This was used to shave back and smooth out the stomach to make room for the green stuff that I would be applying in the next step. I started the sculpting by cutting away a small amount of green stuff. I remembered to avoid that middle section as I did so, and then mixed it all together. Also, remember to use plenty of water or Vaseline whilst you're handling this stuff to prevent it from sticking to your surfaces, fingers or tools as you handle it. With the green stuff mixed, I then rolled some of it out into a small sausage. I pressed this onto the torso and, with my sculpting tool, smoothed this around the stomach. I made sure to fill in all the gaps so that the fabric above the belt was no longer visible and that the green stuff was fairly evenly spread across the whole area. To add the quilting, I chose to use my scalpel to achieve some very fine lines in the green stuff. I started by lightly pressing the blade into the putty in a series of diagonal lines, equally spaced from each other. Once these covered the whole torso, I repeated the process but reversed. As these overlapped the previous lines, it created the desired quilting effect. I was fortunate enough that this came out quite well the first time around, but if you did mess up a bit, I would recommend waiting a little while for the green stuff to firm up. This would allow you to modify the pattern a little, whilst reducing the risk of messing up completely and having to redo the whole thing. While the green stuff was still malleable, I glued the arms into place. By attaching these when the green stuff was still soft meant that I could squash the parts into them slightly in the places where they overlapped. During the step, I was very careful in how I attached the arms. As the green stuff is still soft, it would have been very easy to slip and ruin a good portion of the sculpting. So if you're following this guide for yourself, just take your time and don't apply too much pressure. With the arms in place, I found that there was still a bit of a gap between the arm and the torso that needed to be filled in. As I still had some green stuff mixed, I rolled out a very fine strand, pressed this into the gap and smoothed it out. With the torso now completed, I just needed a head for my squat. And the best place to find one of these was inside yet another excellent kit from Wargames Atlantic. Their Einherjar set are essentially sci-fi Viking dwarves, and on their own would make excellent alternative to squats. However, they don't have that rotundness that the classic squats had, which is why I ultimately went for the Kharadron Overlords instead. However, the heads found within this kit are perfect. There are a number of heads that feature a rounded out helmet design that has the small bumps on either side of the head. There are also some that feature goggles, which again was another common feature of the older squat models and the artwork. While the head was perfect aesthetically, it didn't quite fit against the Kharadron torso. The head sat a little too low as the ball joint beneath it wasn't quite big enough. To resolve this, I took yet more green stuff and rolled it into a small ball. This ball was then added into the neck joint and the head was placed on top of it. I applied a little pressure and angled the head into the desired position. Once I was happy with the position, I removed the head, which left the green stuff in the neck. This had created a new neck joint which would allow the head to sit a little higher, and with this, the model was complete. I just needed to allow the green stuff to cure fully and give everything a suitable paint job, which left me with this. And here we have the completed squat, painted in a colour scheme inspired by their original artwork. Now it's finished, I think I've been able to create something which looks a little more modern but is still recognisable as a classically styled squat. There are of course other options to build out some plastic squats, such as the already mentioned Einherjar kit from Wargames Atlantic and Mantic Games Forge Fathers, but out of those, I still think that this is the closest to the original design. However, if I were to tackle this conversion again, I would have used a different torso. This particular torso has feet which are slightly turned inwards to allow it to fit on the deck of a gun hauler, which makes it look a little odd. In hindsight, one of the Archanaut bodies would have been a better option. But saying that, please do let me know what you thought about this build in the comments below, and if there are any other extinct miniatures that you'd like to see me kitbash, then leave me your suggestions for those too. And with that, the final thing to say is a massive thank you to my supporters. Currently, my top supporters on Patreon are Stuart Smith, Jeremy Kaup, Jake, Douglas Wilson, Daniel Dowling, Raphael Beiruthi, Laconian Primarch, and Casper Strand. So a big thank you to you guys, and if you also support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee, or you just use my affiliates links, then your help is what keeps this channel alive, and it's what allows me to build these different kinds of conversions for you. If you would like to help me out, then you can check out my description for all the relevant links. And so until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.